Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Dr. Padama. I have been getting a lot of requests regarding the creation of an English version of this particular video in our YouTube channel, which is entitled Final Research Defense Frequently Asked Questions. And I have also included tips and reminders for this particular video. So, to get started with the tips and reminders, when we talk about final research defense, this is already past the research proposal stage. Research proposal stage discusses or presents what we call the first three chapters, which includes the background of the study, the RRLS or Review of Related Literature and Study, and the research method and design. Again, included in chapter 3, which is supposed to be the proposal of your research, is the background of your study. That is chapter 1. The second chapter is supposed to be Review of Related Literature and Studies, and the third one includes your method and design, the research method and the research design. So after all of this has been settled and approved by your respective panel or institution panel, or in your school or in your university, then that is the time that you can proceed with what we call the final stage of your research. And then immediately after that, you will have to present the findings of your study to another set of, or another round of research defense, and this is what we call the final research defense. I am presenting this, I am setting the context, because once you enter the final research defense, it is assumed that the first three chapters are already in place and has been approved by the previous panelist in your research proposal defense. So with that in mind, and after setting that particular context, we go on to the tips and reminders. So number 1, make sure that you are familiarity with your manuscript, with the relevance of your theory or concept to the domains used in the specific problem. This is very common when it comes to the defense of your manuscript, your final study, because this always comes up in the question and answering of your defense. So usually the panelist tries to look at the theory, the domains that are found in the theory or concept that you used, and how were they used in your manuscript. Now, this particular question, the asking of the relevance of the theory or concept to your specific problem, is making sure that the domains present in the theory are used in the specific problems. So how do you address number 1? Make sure that the theory or concept or reference that you used in your research can be found or is present in the formulation of your specific problems. Okay, that's tip number 1. Number 2, make sure that your instrument has undergone validation by certified experts relevant to the issue or problem being investigated in your study. So, validation of researcher-made instrument is crucial. Okay, you cannot implement your study if a researcher-made instrument has not gone through validation. So it is crucial that this kind of instrument, researcher-made instrument, goes through validation. If your instrument is a standardized instrument, you need to get permission from the owner of the instrument and document the response of the owner of the instrument, and this will also be presented during the defense, just in case your panel asks for evidences that the owner of the instrument gave their approval to use that instrument in your study. So that's the difference between the two types of instrument. Okay, Standardized instrument does not need to go through validation. Another issue in validation is that there are instruments validated by experts that are not relevant to the field that they are conducting. So also make sure that the experts that you will be getting to validate your instrument are aligned with the problem that you are investigating. So if your problem is related to engineering, mathematics, science, social sciences, and so on and so forth, make sure that the experts are aligned or qualified, or their qualification should be aligned to the problem that you are investigating. So this is number 2. Number 3, secure all necessary permit, certification, approval, or endorsement from all pertinent institutions that are involved in your study. If you have more than one school, one committee, one organization that are involved in your study, make sure you get their consent in these forms. Okay? And these forms should be compiled and organized in the appendix of your study. Then, make sure that the permit, certifications, and approval coming from institutions, committee, individual organizations are relevant to the study being conducted. Again, only those organizations and committee relevant or are involved in the study being conducted should be asked to give permit, certification, approval, or endorsement. The next one, number 4, always observe consistency. I have always repeatedly heard this from different various defense that I have served as a panelist, wherein I see inconsistencies in their manuscript. So let's continue. So observe consistency in the use of terminology, organization of ideas, and format all throughout the writing of the manuscript. So consistency in terms of the use of different terminology. So these terminologies represents your variables, especially variables that are located and presented in your research title. So this should be used consistently all throughout your manuscript. So there are instances where these terminologies take other forms or take synonyms, trying to explain to the panel that they mean the same terms from the first part of the research to the middle part of the research, and then they will be having problem explaining it, and especially if it is not reflected in the definition of terms of your manuscript. So make sure you always practice consistency, not only in the use of the terminology, but also in the organization of ideas in your manuscript. So the organization of ideas in quantitative research should be deductive, and in qualitative research it should be inductive method. The next one, number 5, check the range, the numeric range used in the data interpretation table. Okay, again, these are common issues that arises during the defense, wherein the range or numeric range used for the interpretation table are not consistent, or they cannot explain how they came up with those particular range. Okay, this is usually found in chapter 3, method and design of your research, and the corresponding verbal description of these ranges. Not only the actual description or the literal description, but also the idea that is used in the verbal description. So you have to ask yourself, are these verbal descriptions appropriate to the specific questions being asked in your research? So this is the most common error when presenting or choosing verbal descriptions for your table, for your numerical ranges. Okay, so you are already familiar with the Likert scale that you can use, and there are different verbal interpretations available and readily available. All you need to do is make sure that these verbal descriptions, these verbal interpretations are appropriate to the specific problems that you are using in your study. Okay, the next one, number 6. Do not include findings that are not included in your specific problem. So there are findings that arises during the final defense that are not in line or that are not included in the specific problems of your manuscript. So avoid presenting these findings. These are, even if you say these are just bonuses or additional ideas or knowledge in your study, you should avoid or refrain from doing this because this can derail the direction of your study. Okay, so stick to the specific problems of your manuscript, and these are the guidelines, and these will be the guide for you in presenting the findings of your study. So this will again be relevant to the frequently asked questions that we will be discussing later on. The next one, number 7, do not place numeric values in the presentation of conclusions. When forming your conclusions, forming the last or second to the last part of your manuscript, after this will be your recommendations. Do not repeat the presentation of numeric values in your conclusion. The presentation of numeric values will already be placed in the presentation of the findings of the study, so you do not need to repeat that in the presentation of the conclusion. Next, number 8, present recommendations in a diplomatic and suggestive voice. So you may use may instead of should. So the respondents or the stakeholders may then present the action and then present the point person. May adapt to include and create, organize this one, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is what we mean by diplomatic and suggestive voice, an approach in presenting the recommendation. Again, in the recommendation, number 9, present the action. What do you want the stakeholders to do, which refers to the action, and include the point person who will take charge of the action that you are recommending. Again, another common mistake in the presentation of defense is that in the presentation of your recommendation during the defense is that there are recommendations being presented, there are actions that needs to be taken, but they fail to present the point person that will initiate the suggested action. So make sure you try to present that together with your recommendation. Number 10, the purpose of the final defense is to screen, to make sure that everything is in place and give recommendations that will further develop, improve, and enhance the study. Take the suggestion with an open, humble, and grateful heart. So try to listen to the suggestion, take note, and make sure you understand the relevance of these suggestions to the study that you have created and presented. So again, take it with an open heart. Make sure that you understand the recommendations being given by the panel. And if you have any question during the presentation of the recommendation, it is okay for you to ask questions, clarificatory questions. Okay? But I do not advise you to challenge the recommendations given by the panel. Okay? Again, I do not advise you to challenge the recommendation being given by the panel. You can ask clarificatory questions, and maybe they may reconsider upon presenting your clarificatory question, but again, challenging it is another issue. Okay, next. Number 11, observe and follow the research culture of your respective institution. Every institution has their own research culture. So before you before you even start your research title proposal, you are supposed to be aware of this culture in terms of the format that the institution used, the process that they go through, the validation, reliability test, and everything. Okay, both technical aspect and the actual writing of your manuscript, you are supposed to be familiar with their culture. Okay, so the next is already the frequently asked questions during the actual research. Actually, the FAQ or frequently asked questions are already confined within the last two chapters, which is chapter 4 and chapter 5, because it is already assumed that chapters 1 and chapter 3 has gone through the screening. So these are the questions that you will usually encounter in the presentation of your final research defense. Number 1, who are the respondents of your study and how were they chosen? So try to listen to the question so that you can answer it directly. So there are research writers wherein they give answers that are not directed to the question being asked. So here, you are only asked to present the respondents of the study. The respondents of the study are the grade 6 students of this particular school. And how were they chosen? Try to give the criteria that you used in order to choose your respondents. So the criteria in choosing the respondents are the following. Or if you used a selection method for choosing your respondents, you present that method, and then after that you try to justify why you use this method in your study. Okay? So data gathering procedure. That's number 2. How did you implement the data gathering procedure? When you encounter this particular question, you just narrate the procedure, the process that you have gone through, which is also supposed to be reflected in your manuscript. So this is already found in your manuscript. All you need to do to simplify it is to tell the story behind the data gathering procedure. So if they want you to start in the validation or creation of your instrument, and after being validated, what did you do next, and what's the next step that you did, and how did you distribute, and how did you recover the instruments, and then the next step after that, organizing the instrument, and so on and so forth. So again, this should be in narrative form. You just narrate and discuss. Okay? The third one is, how is the theory relevant to the study? You remember our discussion in the reminders before we started with this video. So it is located here in the tips and reminders. So in this particular question, how is the theory relevant to your study? The theory will always be the basis of the domain that you used in your specific questions, in your SOP. So again, the theory is relevant because the domains reflected in the theory are also the domains that were used in the specific problems of the research. So that is how you are supposed to present and answer this particular question, whether it is a theory, a concept, or a study that you used as a reference for the domains or the creation of the domains of your specific problems. You do not make up the domains in your specific questions. It should be based on a theory, a concept, or a study. Okay, the next one. Number 4, how did you include why? Why did you include the demographic profile of the respondents in the specific problem? The demographic profile should only be included if you will be using the domains of the demographic profile to correlate with another variable. If you failed to do that, meaning you did not use the demographic profile to compare or correlate with another variable, therefore you are not supposed to include the demographic profile of the respondents in your specific problem or in your SOP. So where are you supposed to place the description of the respondents in terms of their demographic profile? You can present that in the population of the study, which is located in chapter 3. Okay? So again, if you are asked this question and you use the demographic profile to compare with another variable in your study, so you can readily answer this. The demographic profile was used to compare to this particular variable of the study in order to identify the proceeding question in the SOP. So usually, you compare what is the relationship of the demographic profile of the respondents to the academic performance of the ganyan. Okay, so usually that is what we mean by correlating. And then the preceding question is there significant relationship between the demographic profile of the respondents and their academic performance? Okay, so if that is the case, then it is valid to use the demographic profile and include that in your study. The next one, number 5. What is your basis for presenting this statement in your interpretation of data? Statement is a realization that you made during the interpretation of data. Interpretation of data is found in chapter 4. So you have your tables, and then immediately below the table you have the interpretation of data, and together with the data you usually present statements. And in order to answer this, what is the basis of your presentation of this statement in your interpretation of data? You try to recall the literatures and studies that you use, and anyway, this is supposed to be reflected in the actual manuscript, in the actual part that is being questioned. Try to look, when you make a statement, it should be backed up with literatures and studies. In the interpretation of data, when you make statements, when you make realizations, this should be backed up by literature, studies, and references. So you just try to look at the references, try to find the references, and that is what you're supposed to present as your answer for this particular question. Okay, number 6, what are the findings of your study? So the findings of your study are already reflected in the last chapter of your manuscript. So you just present that. And again, reminder, make sure that the findings coincide and is aligned with the specific problems of your study, which is found in chapter 1. The next one, number 7, how did you arrive at the conclusion of your study? The conclusions are based on the findings of the study. So that is how you're supposed to, that is the guiding idea for you to be able to answer this question. How did you arrive at the conclusion of your study? So if I was to answer this question, the conclusions are all founded on the findings of the study. So again, another reminder, aside from that, make sure no numerical values are used in the formation of your conclusion. Number 8, what or where will your findings be used? Where will your findings be used? Okay, so in this particular question, make sure that aside from the recommendation, you do not use the recommendation as the answer for this particular question. So your finding can be used aside from further studies or other researches that can continue your research. It can be used as an basis for a program, a plan, an intervention. So this is already an output-based or an action-based research. So you can use that in order to address and answer this particular question. Make sure that you have already prepared an idea on what particular output your study can be used. Okay, again, your study can be used or may be used as a basis for the development and construction of a plan, a program, a framework, or any form of intervention. So this is the conclusion of our discussion for today regarding final research defense, frequently asked questions, tips, and reminders. Again, there will be recommended videos that will appear on the side of your screen, and please do help my YouTube channel by clicking that subscribe button and that notification bell to alert you when a new video has been uploaded. Thank you very much. Good luck, and please give a comment if you have successfully presented your research, and I would gladly appreciate that. I would really appreciate that, hearing back from you. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and God bless. Bye.